Hello, Summoners, and welcome to another episode of ProGuides Best Champions to Main, now on patch 10.12. These champions are all about high performance with low ban rates that are unlikely to get nerfed in the immediate future. The most reliable picks in the game that are the most worthy of investing time in. Before we get started though, our question of the day is, what unpopular champion do you think is sleeper OP? Let us know in the comments below, and without further delay, let's get right into it. To start off our list of 10.12 champions, we'll be looking at Hecarim in the top lane. Unlike the standard flash teleport that most top laners run, you're going to want to run Ghost Ignite. Hecarim's passive converts some of his bonus movement speed into bonus attack damage, so thanks to the recent changes to Ghost making it so that the summoner spell can last for an entire team fight, Hecarim has the ability to transition out of lane and smoothly into team fights, with reset after reset pressing his onslaught forward. His Q gives him strong trading and wave clear, while his W heals him for a percentage of all damage he does while his aura is active. His E can be used to engage, but should be saved to escape ganks until you're absolutely sure you can kill your opponent. Hex ult gives him a way to gap close and fears opponents in an area, so comboing it with your E is an effective tool to split up the enemy forces and push one of their vulnerable targets into the rest of your team for an easy catch. While Hecarim top was already successful, the Ghost changes giving him such strong teamfight presence is what puts him at the top of our list. Much like Hecarim, Olaf is a top laner that can reap the rewards of Ghost's buff. The bread and butter of Olaf's kit is his Q, which lets him throw an axe in a straight line through all targets it hits, doing a moderate amount of damage and slowing enemies hit. When he picks it up, the axe's cooldown is massively reduced, allowing him to chase with slow after slow if he catches someone off guard. His W gives him lifesteal and attack speed, as well as increased healing from all sources the lower his HP is, which synergies insanely well with his passive, which also gives more attack speed the lower he gets. His E is a point-and-click chunk of true damage that gets a lower cooldown for every auto attack he lands. His ultimate removes and prevents all CC for a few seconds, letting him heal no matter what is thrown at him as long as he has a target in range to attack. Previously, Olaf's focus was getting an early game lead thanks to cheese, but he would quickly fall off due to his inability to make his way around team fights. The changes to Ghost and approach velocity make it so that he can move from one target to the next much easier, without being as easy to kite. Poppy is our third pick for the top lane. Her passive gives her an occasional ranged auto attack with bonus damage that drops her buckler on the ground, allowing her to pick it up for a shield. If she kills a unit with her passive, it flies back to her, granting the shield immediately. Her Q is the source of most of her damage, smacking the ground and marking an area that explodes and mirrors the first part's damage. Her W stops dashes and grounds enemies affected while granting Poppy some movement speed for a quick escape or engage. Her E is a short-range targeted charge that shoves an enemy back, stunning them if they collide with terrain. Her ult can be instant casted to knock all enemies in front of Poppy up, or can be charged to knock all enemies caught in her hammer's path back in the direction of their fountain. Poppy is for the player that wants to have the survivability of any other tank, but with the damage that matches even the strongest of bruisers. Before we move on to our junglers, go ahead and take one more look at those top lane builds. There you go. Our first jungle pick is Rammus. Thanks to his extremely easy to use kit and extreme tankiness, Rammus is able to easily engage fights and make picks without any risk to himself. His passive gives him additional damage on hit based on his armor. His Q gives him a ramping movement speed buff for several seconds and slows enemies if he runs into them, giving him a chance to catch them with his E, which taunts an opponent, forcing them to attack him. After activating his W, Rammus gains huge armor and MR bonuses, and any enemies hitting Rammus take damage, with high attack speed AD champs being especially prone to killing themselves just from hitting him. His last tool to disrupt his opponents is his ult, which sends out tremors that damage and build up a slow on opponents. This ability also does some damage to structures. Up next in the jungle is Warwick, a bruiser focused mostly on 1v1s and small skirmishes. His passive gives him on-hit damage, which heals him if he's below half HP. His Q is a simple but effective bite that chunks an enemy, applies on-hit effects, and can be held down to pull Warwick to the other side of his opponent. While being held down, his Q follows his opponents even if they flash away. His W's passive grants him increased movement speed and attack speed towards low HP targets, with the bonuses being tripled against enemies that are critically low. It can also be activated to hunt out his closest enemy in range. The most skill-expressive part of his kit, Warwick's E, grants him damage reduction on first cast for a short amount of time, and on second cast, or after a set amount of time, he howls, fearing all enemies in a small area around him. His ultimate is a leap with the range scaling with his movement speed. He suppresses the first champion he comes into contact with, shredding them with his claws, applying on-hit effects, and healing for a huge amount. His extremely healthy clear and insane early game dueling make WW a strong and easy-to-use pick for both experienced and new junglers. Another tankier option, Nunu excels at clearing his jungle while almost always being full HP and takes objectives with ease. His passive activates when he hits a champion, large monster, or structure, and gives him and an ally attack speed and grants a small magic damage cleave to his autos, speeding up his jungle clear. His Q lets him take a bite out of an enemy, dealing a small bit of magic damage to champs or a massively increased chunk of true damage to non-champion targets. It also heals him, with the healing becoming stronger against non-champions and anytime Nunu is below 50% HP. Nunu's W is a large rolling snowball that picks up speed, knocking up and stunning enemies for a time based on how long the ability was charged. After engaging with W, his E slings snowballs, slowing enemies repeatedly, and anyone tagged by snowballs are rooted for a short time if they are near Nunu at the end of the ability's duration. His ult grants him a shield as he channels an increasing slow that explodes for huge damage if he's allowed to channel for a full 3 seconds. The ability can be interrupted or cancelled early to prevent enemies from escaping the damage. While Nunu is pretty simple and easy to pull off, he does require some macro and game knowledge, like understanding how to path and where to gank to secure dragons. If you want to learn the proper way to utilize such a strong pick, be sure to stop by at ProGuides.com, where our top-tier coaches are readily available to teach you this and many other concepts so that you can climb the ladder and reach your goals. And here are those jungle builds for you to check out one more time. Our first mid laner is a repeat from last patch's top 3 mids. Vel'Koz continues to be a strong pick with great wave clear, hard to avoid poke, and huge teamfight damage, able to wipe entire teams out with good positioning. His passive works by tagging an enemy with damage from his spells 3 times, popping for a burst of true damage. His Q is a straight line skill shot that splits at the end, potentially damaging and slowing 3 opponents. His W is his primary wave clear, a straight line that deals damage once as he opens a rift to the void, and a second time as it explodes. His E is his safety net, knocking enemies up and slightly away from him, giving him time to wriggle away as he shoots his other abilities for a free passive proc. His ult's laser has such high damage output that he can almost single-handedly wipe out an entire enemy team if they stand in it for the entire duration. His angles can take a bit of getting used to, but once mastered, even the best opponents struggle to keep up with the game of dodgeball that playing against Vel'Koz becomes. Always a solid choice, Orianna is doing exceptionally well lately. Her passive's on-hit magic damage gives her an easy time last hitting and trading, and her Q doubles down on that, moving her ball to both wave clear and dish out damage to an enemy trying to overstep in lane. Repositioning her ball with Q sets up Ori for her W, which dishes out an instant burst of AoE damage around the ball, slowing enemies and speeding up allies in the resulting zone. Her E allows her to attach the ball to herself or an ally, granting a shield as well as some resistances. Orianna's ult is what gives her such huge teamfight potential. Positioning the ball with Q in the middle of as many enemies as possible and shockwaving to pull them all in while nuking them is the best way for Ori to start a fight. Alternatively, you can attach the ball to an ally with engage, such as Jarvan or Malphite, to land a huge wombo combo. Rumble, like Vel'Koz, is still holding down a spot on our top 3 list for mid. His passive gives him a unique heat bar instead of the normal mana or energy resources most other champions have. Managing this heat properly means more damage when the bar is above half filled, and reaching 100% heat prevents Rumble from casting his abilities but gives him on-hit magic damage. His Q is a flamethrower that melts anything in a short range in front of him. His W gives him a shield with a movement speed increase to chase down opponents, escape ganks, or just sidestep skill shots. His E is a charge-based harpoon that can store 2 shots at a time. Hitting an opponent damages and slows them, and landing a second harpoon further slows the target. Rumble's ult calls down a long rectangle of fire, dealing massive damage and a heavy slow to enemies that get caught in it. The mid lane build should be back up on your screen now, just in case you missed anything before. Our first ADC for 10.12 is Sivir, a hyper carry with a bit of utility. Her passive gives her some extra movement speed to kite or chase down enemies in teamfights every time she does damage to a champ with either auto attacks or an ability. Her Q is a huge boomerang that can chunk opponents and serves as her primary pushing ability in lane. As she scales to the later stages of the game, her W becomes her primary form of wave clear and teamfight damage, as her ricochet scales with the percentage of her auto attack damage, crits included. Her E is a spell shield, providing both a safety net against being caught out, as well as a nice bit of mana restoration. Sivir's ult gives her a passive increase in attack speed while her W is active, and activating it gives her and any nearby allies a huge boost of movement speed to engage a fight or escape being caught in a bad spot. If you want to trade out a bit of Sivir's utility for an upgrade in the potential damage department, Jinx is the one for you. Her passive procs when a champ, epic monster, or structure dies within 3 seconds of her damaging it, and grants her a huge movement speed and attack speed boost, removing the standard attack speed cap. Her Q lets her toggle between her 2 guns. Pow Pow revs up her attack speed with each auto, while Fishbones gives hugely increased range with AoE splash damage on each attack, at the cost of some mana and attack speed. Her W is an extremely fast projectile that damages and slows the first enemy hit, and her E sets a line of traps on the ground that root and damage champs that walk over them. These 2 abilities are key to Jinx peeling herself, as she has no mobility without getting a passive proc. Her ult is a global rocket that can be used to execute low HP enemies, and is especially useful for reaching out of range champs to get passive and turn on in a teamfight. Our last entry is yet another hyper carry in Kai'Sa. Kai'Sa's passive comes in 3 parts. The first part of her passive gives her auto attacks on hit magic damage. The second part makes her auto attacks, her W, and nearby allies' immobilizing abilities apply stacks of plasma to enemies. Only Kai'Sa can apply a 5th stack of plasma, and when she does, the enemy takes a percentage of their missing HP as damage. Thanks to the third part of her passive, which evolves her abilities based on stat thresholds, Kai'Sa is able to build in a way that utilizes several broken items all at once. What other champ can buy Manamune, Guinsoo's Rageblade, and Zanya's without being accused of trolling? Her Q shoots out missiles that deal increased damage to low HP targets, with the number of missiles increasing once she hits 100 bonus AD. Her W is a long-range missile that applies 2 stacks of plasma and reveals the enemy hit. With 100 AP, the cooldown is massively reduced when she hits a champ, and enemies hit get 3 stacks of plasma. Her E grants her a burst of movement speed but locks her out of attacking. At the end of the charge, she gets a big spike in attack speed for a short time. Once she's over the bonus attack speed threshold, which scales down with level, Kai'Sa becomes invisible while charging up. Her ult allows her to dash to any enemy recently affected by plasma. This can be used in many ways, either following up on an ally's engage, repositioning in a fight, or making a quick escape from a gank. Here's one last look at those bot lane builds for you. Take a peek at those. Our first pick for support is Taric. Taric's passive makes his next 2 auto attacks much faster, deal more damage, and lower his ability cooldowns. His W gives an ally a shield and a percentage of Taric's armor, and makes them a beacon for his abilities. This means any of his other abilities will also cast from his bastioned ally, including his ult. His Q is a charge-based heal, with each passive auto giving him 1 charge. Note, the amount of Q charges he can hold depends on the amount of points he has in this ability, but the amount of healing per charge doesn't go up, so you should always put 2 points in it, and then max your other 2 abilities first. His E lights up a small rectangle in front of him, stunning enemies inside after a brief delay. Taric can move to follow his enemy's attempts at dodging this ability. After a delay, his ult renders Taric and all nearby allies completely invulnerable to damage. This ability is definitely hard to master, but once you have the hang of it, it can easily turn a fight and prevent huge amounts of damage from affecting your team. Second for our supports is another beefy boy, Alistar. Alistar's passive gains stacks when minions die near him, and anytime he applies hard CC to an enemy. At 7 stacks, he roars, healing himself and a nearby ally. If an enemy champ or epic monster dies nearby, he heals instantly regardless of stacks. His Q is a smash that knocks up all enemies in close proximity, and is best comboed with his W's headbutt to set up an all-in lane phase, or an engage for a team fight. If that CC isn't enough, Alistar's E is a trample effect that gives him a stack each time trample damages an enemy champ. At 5 stacks, his next auto attack does increased damage and stuns the enemy he hits. Alistar's ult breaks CC and gives him massively reduced damage, making him an extremely effective tank for several seconds as he waits for the next round of his abilities to come up. If you prefer supports focused on healing and shielding, Nami sweeps away the competition as the best enchanter to play on 10.12. Her passive grants allies movement speed while they're touched by her abilities, providing an extra boost to your front line's engage, and helping your carries position better. Her Q is a small bubble that suspends enemies caught in it, helpful for peeling your carries or for setting her team up for kills when going on the offensive. Her W provides both sustain and poke, with skillful players being able to use the bouncing mechanic to get maximum value. Her E is underrated but extremely powerful, giving her allies next 3 attacks damage and a slow. Nami's ult rounds out her versatile kit, helping to either speed up her team's engage while disrupting retreating enemies, or helping her allies retreat while disengaging the enemy's attempt at taking a fight. And finally, here are the support builds for your perusal one more time before we close it out. Thanks so much for watching, guys. We hope you enjoyed this video along with the rest of our patch 10.12 series. Once again, let us know in the comments which unpopular champion you think is sleeper OP so we can hit you with the hot, fresh heart react. We really do love hearing from all you guys, so thank you for your comments. See you all next time. Good luck out on the Rift, and please, wash your hands.